Fionna Cake Season 2 is confirmed now, and as I'm getting back into the swing of things with YouTube, I wanted to make a little recap video of the Fionna Cake series. As each episode analysis is pretty long, I decided to split it up into two parts, but that does mean the second part will include episode 10 finale analysis, so stay tuned for that. But without further ado, grab some popcorn and get caught up on all the lore of episodes 1 through 5 of Fionna Cake Season 1. But with these two new episodes being released, Fionna Campbell and Simon Petrikov, Fionna Campbell has a ton of stuff inside the episode that makes it just amazing. So let's get into it. Pretty much the entire first sequence of this episode is the dream sequence that we're already aware of from the trailer and sneak peek. A couple things though. Cake does drop some foreshadowing when she says,
"You have a bus to catch,"
to Fionna after they're fighting this rat bus, and just as Fionna is about to get KO'd, she gets saved by some ice. Now, who is the source of this mysterious ice? You guessed it, Ice Prince. And the Ice Prince isn't even over yet. Fionna mentions him a lot throughout this entire episode, which is interesting because his character alone doesn't look like Simon, but also doesn't look like the Ice King. So who could this be and what could it represent? But with these new icy abilities, Fionna spawns on some ice skates and mentions
Brinker action, go!
Which might sound a little random, but it's a nod to a character from a novel, which kind of sparked speed skating in the United States. Of course, Fionna comes out victorious, and of course, the Ice Prince congratulates Fionna and Cake, but something seems off, and if you notice the way he's talking to Fionna,
and so funny and interesting,
it sounds very reminiscent of how Ice King wrote Fionna and Cake to talk about him in his fanfics.
You saved the day, Mega Rad Cool Guy.
In fact, Fionna asks who the Ice Prince really is, and the Ice Prince grows a strange smirk, almost like something's up, that all these characters in this universe are up to something, which is something I'm gonna bring up a lot throughout this video. But just as they are about to touch hands, the Ice Prince starts imitating an alarm clock, the ice melts below Fionna and Cake, and they drown further and further into the water. And it turns out this was all a dream, which we kind of expected from the sneak peek and trailer, but this confirms it. Now this is where things start to get really juicy, so I'm gonna need y'all to put your thinking caps on and get ready. Starting off with the BMO alarm clock. Now we all knew that this looked like BMO, but if you listen to the voice, it's BMO's voice as well. Then we get some amazing shots of Fionna looking around her apartment, with her sink full of dirty dishes and a TV nestled right in the corner. But if you zoom in here, this almost looks like a picture of Normal Man. Interesting, but then in the TV scene, this picture in the right side of the screen has duck feet, but it kind of looks like Jake or Jermaine with boxing gloves on. And if her apartment wasn't enough of a sign, Fionna is absolutely dreading life. And then we cut straight to the intro. Now let me tell you, when I first heard this song in the sneak peek, I fell in love right away, so I am so happy that it's the intro song of all things. But there's a lot to talk about in this single intro sequence, so let's get started. Starting out with the title card itself. It gives off very sitcom vibes, and we also get an outside shot of her apartment. But as she's running outside of her apartment, she starts off in a waitress outfit, then transforms into a maid outfit, then to a construction worker outfit, then to a mailman outfit, then to a lifeguard outfit, and then finally, a fast food worker outfit. Two things to know here. This is the scene that we saw in the sneak peek, and look at where she's catching up to. A bus, which Cake foreshadowed in her dream at the very beginning. But this isn't the only bus that was foreshadowed. Then we just get some amazing shots of Fionna in a brand new art style, which I am in love with, coupled with a very cute shot of Fionna and Cake in her apartment. One thing that I actually noticed from this shot is if you zoom into the top left corner, that kind of looks like one of the daggers from the episode Rainy Day Daydream, which if you didn't know, was an episode in season 1 and was kind of the introductory episode to how the imagination works in Adventure Time. Coupled that with what Fionna and Cake is, very interesting. This next shot shows Cake sick, which might seem like a little gag here, but it will be very important for this episode. Then we get some amazing shots of Gary. That's right, this is Gary, not Prince Gumball or Gumball, Gary. And these scenes showcase Fionna and Gary's relationship, which is as really good friends, which we will see more later in this episode. Then we see some new shots of Marshall Lee, and a couple things to point out from this scene specifically. First, probably the most obvious one, look at the ducks, very similar similar to the two-headed ducks that we see in the intro of the original series. And then something important that I really want you to note down. Look at where they're at. They're at some kind of fountain, and look at where the water is coming from. Frogs. Remember that little detail? Because it will be huge. Then we see DJ Flame, which we saw from the trailer, and oh my gosh, they kissed. So they're confirmed dating, right? Okay, never mind. Then we conclude the intro sequence with a nice little compilation of all the new characters that we see, with this final shot of Cake and Fionna enjoying some spaghetti in her apartment. But this last scene has a ton of things to talk about. First and foremost, if we zoom in on what I thought might have been Jake or Jermaine with boxing gloves, it's not. Looks like a frog with duck legs. But second, if you zoom a little bit to the left, what's on the TV? A program called Cheers. Now remember this as well. And finally, if you go all the way up to the top and you look at that poster, it looks like a triangle with an eye in the middle. And if you remember from the sneak peek and trailer, that rooster, look at the background. It's that same triangle. I'm so excited to find out what that might mean. Now from this scene alone, I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that I'm forgetting, so please let me know. But getting back to the actual episode, we pick up right where we left off. Fionna is absolutely miserable and doesn't want to go to work, but she turns on the TV and guess what's on? Cheers, filmed in front of a live studio audience. But as she starts scrolling through different channels, Cheers is the only channel on. There are 0 other channels.
Cheers is filmed before Cheers is filmed before a live studio audience.
Couple that with the fact that we see Cheers in the intro sequence, it sounds like Cheers is a pretty big thing in this world. But remember back to the episode Simon and Marcy. What's the scene Simon plays out for Marceline on the TV? He sings a theme song that we will talk about later, but he says 2 things.
Filmed before a live studio audience.
Norm!
Now what do we hear from the Cheers that Fionna plays on her TV?
Cheers is filmed before a live studio audience.
Evening, everybody.
Right off the bat, something isn't right. But as we continue, Fionna tells Cake that she keeps having these good dreams. In fact, she's had the same dream 3 times in a row, with the Ice Prince being there every single time. But as Fionna explains her dreams to Cake, if you look in the top right corner, she has a poster with the word Mars on it. And if you know Mars and Adventure Time, they're not new. Things just keep getting weirder and weirder. But oh boy, let me tell you, they're only gonna get even more weird. Which sounds crazy, but it's true. But remember how I said in the intro, we see Cake get a little sick? Well, Fionna notices, and we cut to a POV of what Cake sees and hears. And it's all gibberish, unless it's food or her name, but something catches her eye, and it's coming from the freezer. So, Cake rushes towards it, and it turns out it's ice. Cake needs ice. In fact, she just rolls around in it. If you zoom into the top right corner, we see a coat hanging from the coat hanger, and it vaguely resembles Betty's coat, the one that we see when she jumps through the time portal, but that could be a bit of a stretch. But another interesting thing to point out here is that Cake became obsessed with this ice, but only 3 days ago.
You haven't really eaten in like 3 days.
Meaning something happened 3 days ago to cause Cake to act like this. Very interesting. She even declines her favorite tuna sandwich. And Fionna finally has enough and just decides that she's gonna call the vet to get Cake in. But even from this scene, there's a really interesting thing to point out. First, we get a better look at that dagger from Rainy Day Daydream. But if you zoom into the left side of the screen, we see a figure with a sword pointed high in the sky on top of a hill. Now, in my opinion, this is a nod to the direction that they were going to take Martin in the first place. If you didn't know, in the storyboard for the Lich episode, Bucko explains how a hero of Ooh was unlawfully cast into the Citadel, and Billy tells Finn that that's his dad. I'm guessing this is the direction that they were going to take Martin in the first place, that he was going to be some type of hero just like Finn was, but they ended up scrapping that and making him a deadbeat dad. At least that's my opinion. But she gets the vet appointment booked around lunchtime, so she has to take Cake with her for work, and as she steps out of her apartment, we saw this in the sneak peek, but then the camera ominously zooms in towards the door and then fades to the refrigerator, and then out of nowhere, ice comes out of the ice dispenser. From the very get-go, something's not right about this ice, or in fact, anything cold for that matter. And everybody noticed this in the sneak peek, but we do see Magic Man's hat, which was last worn by Betty. We see the gender-bent Ash and the human Wildberry princess, along with a traffic cone that's upside down and a dead rose. Now on the bus, this was already speculated, but but Fionna is confirmed to be a tour guide on this bus. Specifically, she works for Queenie's Bus Tours.
Welcome to Queenie Bus Tours. My name is Fionna Campbell, and I will be your guide today.
And we'll see Queenie in a little bit, but you can tell she's very obviously miserable. Like, very obviously. We get some more confirmation on who these gender-bent characters are with Hot Dog Princess, which we knew from the trailer. And to be honest, I didn't know who this yellow guy was, and some of you pointed out that he looks like a banana guard, and I'll have you know, you are definitely right. This is a banana guard, and the person in the back is actually Fern, confirmed, but I'll touch on that in a little bit. Then we get two more close-ups of Abraca Danielle, and this mysterious lady who we end up finding out who she is very soon. But notice the newspaper she's holding, titled question mark with the ice crown with one gem, coupled with Cake the cat who can stretch and talk in the bottom left, and Betty. Very interesting. We'll actually start to see a lot of Betty imagery very soon. Last but not least, we see Starchy and Marshall Lee. It's amazing seeing Donald Glover back as Marshall Lee, so this is perfect. And later in the episode, Donald Glover has an amazing song. Well, Marshall Lee has an amazing song, but you get it. So remember when I said we would get a lot of Betty imagery in this episode? Well, here's the first one. This is very obviously a statue of Betty. And a couple things to note from this scene alone. The frogs. Remember when I said in the intro sequence to remember the frogs? Well, this is the statue that Fionna and Marshall Lee were sitting at. Now, frogs aren't new in Adventure Time. That might sound dumb, but hear me out. In the episode Temple of Mars, they were used as a symbol of change. And seeing them here coupled with Betty, very interesting. Fionna also mentions that the statue underwent renovation 12 years ago.
It underwent a renovation 12 years ago.
Who's the statue of?
Don't know, dude.
Which, coincidentally, is the exact amount of time that's passed in the Land of Ooh universe since Betty fused with Gold. So something happened that caused Fionna and Cake's universe to appear different. Or maybe something else is going down entirely. But as the tour continues, they pass by the aquarium. And as Fionna reluctantly points it out because she hates her job, she notices some similarities between the penguins and the Ice Prince's penguins. And from here on out, something changes in Fionna. She immediately starts asking if anybody on the bus knows how to decipher dreams and what they mean. And she talks about how she thinks the universe is trying to tell her something, which is something I pointed out in the beginning, that almost everybody in this universe is trying to tell her something. But Marshall Lee thinks he's cracked the case and tell her it's because DJ Flame just broke up with her. So what happened in the intro sequence is actually true, sadly. But she's persistent that that's not what it is, that her dream means something more significant than anybody else. And as she starts to talk about that, everybody else starts to think that their dreams mean something too, from being a hot dog to banana to confirming that this is Fern. Not only that, but in the credits of the episode, Fern is credited as a character in this episode. So this is Fern. But as they continue with the tour, they pass by an ice skating rink. Now, if you remember, that was the very thing Fionna was doing in the beginning of her dream. But also, Cake freaks out because it's something cold, ice. So Cake goes all crazy trying to get off the bus to get to that ice rink, and Fionna tries to stop her with pretty much no luck. But remember how I said Queenie was gonna appear? Well, it turns out that mysterious passenger was Queenie, going all undercover boss mode to see what Fionna was actually doing, because she got some pretty bad reviews. And it's not looking good for Fionna, because she explains how Cake is sick, but Queenie just thinks she's bringing a rabid animal on the bus tours. And just as it looked like Fionna got Cake under control, Cake sees the ice skating rink again and goes bonkers, to the point where Queenie tells the bus driver to stop the bus, and they all get off. And after a culmination of a ton of things, including Marshall Lee never paying for his bus rides, and Fionna not really caring, Queenie straight up fires her. And if you couldn't tell that this new series was rated TV-14, you can now. But now without a job, Fionna begins walking down the street, passing all these amazing shops, and these shops are very detailed, and I'm sure there's a ton of stuff I'm missing, but the only one that stood out to me was this sword that we see in the very beginning, and how it looks very similar to the sword that we see Fionna use in the comic series. Oh, and also maybe the oozers? Could be a stretch, but it looks a little similar. And as she's talking about what jobs she could even do now, she passes by another shop that kind of looks like Party Bears, and then as she continues, she passes by Lemon Hope, which we saw in the trailer, and then this character who I have no idea who was meant to represent. It's the same voice actor as BMO, but I don't know. And then this last character who who is playing with fushigi balls? What's going on? Well, there's a couple of things to point out from that scene. First, as she's walking down, she's explaining to Cake how the city is so boring. There's nowhere to go, there's nothing that happens, there's no cool people, just that the overall city is boring. But that's why I think these characters are trying to say something, because as she's saying that none of these guys are cool, the very character right next to her is playing with fushigi balls, the coolest thing that you could possibly do. What's going on? But on the warm-hearted sign, as she passes by that building, we can see a mural of tree trunks. It's the same silhouette along with that apple, indicating her beloved apple pies. Now this is just so cool because if you didn't know, the voice actor of Tree Trunks, Polly Lou Livingston, sadly passed away. So seeing her make a cameo in this new series is so amazing. But as she continues to walk down the street, the very next building in the background window, it looks like a lobster. And seeing a lobster in the Adventure Time universe is not new and means something a lot deeper. We first saw it in the You Forgot Your Floaties episode, in which Betty gains the madness of Magic Man in order to try to save Simon. But in that episode, Simon emerges from the pool with lobster hands saying the words "You forgot your floaties," meaning she jumped off the deep end without fully realizing what she's even getting into. At least that's my opinion. Then Fionna gets caught behind 3 human banana guards who are talking about,
you know, Jerry from HR?
Which is super important for the next episode. But I'm not going to talk about the next episode yet because this video is already going to be way long. But remember the conversation that these human banana guards are having. Nonetheless, Fionna is done with it and she just pushes them right out the way. Not a care in the world. She has a mission and no one's stopping her. Then these 2 roller derby players come out of nowhere and actually admire Fionna's pushing ability to those human banana guards. Even this interaction is very important for the next episode. So if you can, please remember it. However, she declines. And then we get an amazing outside look of Butler's Buttery Buns, which is the place Gary works. I'm sorry, it's so hard to say Gary. Now we get to see Gary working on his latte, and you can very obviously tell he has those perfectionist characteristics that both Princess Bubblegum and Prince Gumball have. But look at the art that he made on his latte. It's PB Swan that she rides. And then we finally understand where Fionna was going while she was walking to the street. Butler's Buttery Buns. And then pretty much just this entire scene between Fionna and Gary perfectly summarized their relationship, that they're just really good friends. But Fionna asks Gary how long they've known each other, and Gary responds,
I don't know. I guess like forever.
Which could indicate 2 things: an over-exaggeration because they've known each other since they were pretty much kids, or he doesn't remember because this is all a fabrication, because he seems genuinely confused but still answers forever. But that's a little wild, so let me calm down. Then out of nowhere we find out who Butler is. Beatrice Butler, the human version of Butterscotch Butler from Fionna and Cake. And let me tell you, they nailed the dynamic that Prince Gumball and Butterscotch Butler had in the Fionna and Cake episode, down to the very T. I love this. But after Gary being heartbroken about his new invention and his 64-step plan in opening his own bakery, Gary reminds Fionna of her vet appointment, which of course she forgot about. So she takes some of his new cookies on the road and quickly dashes out of there. And then we get a new shot of the city she lives in, and let me tell you, it looks amazing. But this city is just ridden with glitches everywhere and a sign that says sign. Is that a sign? I think it is. But remember when I said that Marshall Lee sings an amazing song in this episode? Well, here it is. And it's amazing, but unlucky for Fionna, Marshall Lee's majestic vocals weren't enough to stop her from having an even worse day, as she runs right into him, causing coffee to spill all over her uniform, which she has to return because she got fired. With no money and not being able to get her money back for her deposit, she tells Marshall Lee that there's no way she's going to be able to afford rent this month, let alone the vet. And it turns out Fionna's landlord is Marshalene's mom. And in gender bent terms, that means that that's Marshalene's father, which makes sense because Marshalene's father, Hunson Abadir, is a demon, lord of evil, and the ruler of the Nightosphere. And if you know what landlords are, they're also not the nicest people. So although Marshall Lee couldn't help Fionna with her rent problem, he can help her with the vet problem, saying he knows a guy by the name of Ellis who won't do it for money, but he'll do it for some of those good treats that Gary made. But with no other options, Fionna accepts. So she heads off to see this guy named Ellis, and she has to go through the city gardens, which is where we see the statue of Betty. So as she goes deeper and deeper, she meets a mysterious gardener who brings her to the beautiful flower field that we saw in the trailer. This mysterious person talks about how all these flowers, which can actually be considered weeds, are
chill and harmonious. My beautiful misfits.
Which makes a lot of sense, coming from the person that very obviously represents Huntress Wizard, but we don't know this mysterious person's name yet, but we will. Then we get the scene from the trailer in which she blows on the dandelion, and it turns out she didn't get everything, and pretty much sums up her entire day. But it turns out this mysterious person's name is Hunter.
My name is Hunter. God.
Now, I know I haven't been pointing out a lot of things, but that is because I haven't been given a lot to work with, so bear with me. But that's about to change real soon. Hunter can bring Fionna to the person she's looking for, Ellis. And the place where Ellis is located looks very similar to where the episode Wheels takes place. Just look at it. But another thing to note here, look at this tree. There's initials carved in a heart on the tree, B+M. Now, I'm not quite sure on who this could mean, so please let me know. And it's revealed that this is LSP, the human version of LSP, but first name Ellis, last name P. And LSP is voiced by none other than Pendleton Ward, the original person who played LSP in the show.
Ah, stranger! Get her, boys! In her face!
But it turns out LSP really isn't the veterinarian type and ends up conning Fionna to diagnose Cake instead of him. And then we get the iconic shot from the trailer, and out of nowhere we cut back to Cake's POV, and we see these blues sparkling in the distance, which if you remember, indicates that something cold is nearby. So Cake immediately springs towards it, running out of the deep forest and back into the city garden. And as they run through the city gardens again, we see two more characters, who, if you couldn't tell, are the gender-bent versions of Lemongrab 1 and Lemongrab 2, along with their Campbell, now as a dog, and they are portrayed perfectly. Finally, it's revealed that Cake is running towards an ice cream stand, which, of course, is cold. But if you notice, the person working at the ice cream stand looks very familiar to the Ice Queen. In fact, her ice cream cart depicts the mountains in which the Ice Kingdom is located in. And to Cake, there's this emanating blue glow coming from inside the ice cream stand, to which she jumps right in and disappears, followed by the portal closing as well. And the episode ends there, but there's even more in this outro sequence. Look at the dreams of Fionna and Cake. What does it look like? It resembles the treehouse, but in the human world. Now, what makes me say that? First, you can see the boat with the umbrella right on top. But second, we know for a fact that the Ice Kingdom is located on the left, indicated by those mountains on the left, and the Mystery Mountains on the right, which is indicated by those mountains on the right. So this is 100% the treehouse, but in the form of Fionna and Cake's human world. And I won't spoil anything about episode 2, but their dreams are different in episode 2. Now, I am sure that I missed a ton of things to point out because there were just so many things in this episode. And boy, am I not looking for episode 2. There are so many things in that episode. Again, tell me what I missed because I know I missed a ton, but until the next time where we deep dive into episode 2, I will see you all later. Stay adventurous. Is Simon Petrikov a top 5 Adventure Time episode of all time? Well, in this video, we'll unravel secrets that will change your view of Fionna and Cake forever. In fact, the entire Adventure Time universe forever. From hidden Easter eggs and secrets to emotional details, we're diving into elements that shake the very foundation of everything we thought we knew. Are you ready? Right off the bat, we're thrown into the intro sequence of this episode. And if you notice, it's different compared to the one we got in the first episode. Off the bat, we zoom into this futuristic city floating in the air, which we saw glimpses of in the trailer and sneak peek. But it's revealed that this is the human island, the place that the humans built once they arrived in Ooh from Come Along With Me. Even as we're zooming in, we spot one of the characters from the sneak peek itself. But where are we zooming into exactly? Well, the focus is this building, and compared to the other buildings around it, it's very low tech. And the sign itself says 20th century man in his natural habitat. habitat. So much dust. And who could be the only human this old? That's right, Simon Petrikov. Now, I want to point out something here that is crazy. Notice where we're zooming into Simon Petrikov at, the back of his head. And we are zooming in towards his head. And after we go inside of his head, what do we see? Fiona's world and her apartment. Now, if that doesn't scream that Fionna and Cake's world are all a part of Simon's imagination in his own head, I don't know what does. But I want you to remember the back of the head part of Simon, because it actually plays a really important role at the very end of the episode. And then we continue to zoom even further towards her window, which reveals Simon's glasses, but then Golb, or at least a statue of Golb, along with the same crocodile clips that Betty used to attach to Maja to summon Golb in the first place. And we'll see more of this later on. But then we see what looks like electricity coming from the crocodile clips into Golb, as if someone just powered him up, and then it cuts to black and white, and Golb's head snaps off. For some reason, this is so scary. And if you didn't know, the black and white is referencing when Betty fused with Golb in the finale Come Along With Me. And then something happens that we didn't see happen in the first episode, but we did see it in the sneak peek. These glitches, which I thought were used to represent different universes. And it seems that it's still like that. But the first different universe that we glitched to is Fiona's, which I just said seems to be only part of Simon's imagination in his mind. But maybe not. Then we get another glitch to a different universe, and we actually know what this universe is. We saw it a lot in the trailer, and it's Farm World. At least a farm world where Marceline became the vampire queen, and vampires are still haunting the land of Ood. But that begs the question, who is this person running? Because if you remember, one of the images that we got from an interview, Fionna is in this exact same street, but her hat has long ears, and it doesn't really look like Farm World Finn because this person has baby hands. So who is this? Well, it might be Finn's baby brother that we saw in the crossover episode. A bit of a stretch, but we don't really have anything to work off of until we get the actual episodes. Then we glitch to another universe, and this is the Land of Ood universe. And this is our Finn. But how do I know that? Because he's going to come up later in this episode a lot. And then we glitch to another universe, or maybe a flashback, because this is the treehouse after the finale Come Along With Me, after they planted the fern seed there, because you can even see the Finn sword on top. But one thing that's missing from this shot right here compared to the actual shot that we see in the finale is the snail. This will be a crucial detail for later on in the episode, so please remember it. Then we glitch out again to show what this fern tree looked like 1,000 years in the future. Something's different with these glitches, and it makes me think that time travel is involved. And then we glitch back to outside Fiona's apartment, but something's different this time. Her apartment is destroyed. But not only that, this almost looks like a piece of paper with a giant hole tore out in the middle of it. I think this means that her world, her universe, is literally tearing apart, because in the first episode, we see a ton of glitches throughout her city. Now, the cause of these glitches in her universe tearing apart is still unknown, but I'm sure we'll find out. And wouldn't you know, the very next glitch shows scenes of Simon, who slowly turn around to reveal the back of his head and an ominous blue glow coming off it. There's an obvious emphasis on Simon's mind, and we've seen this blue glow before in episode 1, and we'll see this blue glow even more at the end of this episode. Then we cut to a new look at Prismo, who doesn't look so good, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but we also get Fionna and Cake running through the time room looking very excited, but the glitches aren't done yet. And the very next one is one of the first shots that we saw of Fionna and Cake, so pretty cool. Then this next glitch is probably the most bizarre out of them all, and it's Fionna and Cake walking through a desert or some really dry area, sweating and crying. I literally have zero idea what this could be, but something interesting to note about this scene is the jacket that Fionna is wearing is the same jacket that we see Martin Mertens wear in the episode The Visitor. Interesting. But we cut back to the time room, and Fionna and Cake are still running through it, and Cake transforms into a bunch of different things, including a butterfly, the symbol for infinity, what looks like Jake, or maybe a Jake pup, a cute cat snowman, a bat, some cubes, I have no idea what this is, and finally, an egg. This egg and the inclusion of what I think might be Jake is very interesting, because if you remember in the trailer, the only look that we got of Jake was him running with an egg. But as Fionna and Cake continue through the time room, they finally make it out and jump into the abyss, and the title card appears. Now you might think hanging onto a green shape that looks familiar to those shapes that float around Golb, the ice crown, not on him, and his blue robe as the Ice King. But this is Simon, with the gray streak of hair. Something else to note here is that when the intro sequence officially ends, it ends by having the camera go into Simon's mouth, which might seem like a one-off gag, but it actually reminded me a lot of the very first episode of Fionna and Cake, in which it was revealed that Fionna and Cake is just fanfiction written by the Ice King. But how did they do it? They had the camera zoom into Fionna's mouth and out Ice King's mouth. It might be a bit of a reach, but I believe that's a nod to the very first episode of Fionna and Cake in the Adventure Time series. Now, this is only the intro sequence, quite literally the first 30 seconds of the episode. And there's this much. But let's get into the actual episode, shall we? We open to a world that looks very similar to the post-apocalyptic era in the land of Oo. And sure enough, it is, with Simon and Marcy running away from the Oozers. What immediately sparked my attention is how similar this area looks to the area that we see in the episode Empress Eyes, when Marceline recounts what her life was like after Simon left her. Which is funny because we get a direct reference to that exact episode and that exact flashback later on in this episode. Not only that, but the trees in this flashback look scarily similar to the objects that we see coming out of the buildings in the Farm World universe that we saw in the intro sequence. When Simon ripped the translator off of the dog, he never gave it back. He still has it. And in the official trailer, we see this Cake the cat with the same translator on. So my guess is Simon will eventually put this translator on Cake and she'll start to explain everything. And Simon's probably going to be pretty shocked. But let's talk about the credits because this is pretty crazy. If you look at their dream, in every outro sequence we've gotten so far, they've dreamed about something different. In the first episode, it was about the treehouse in Fionna and Cake's world. And now this one is the exact same bone mask that the bear wore, with a nice little butterfly on top. Now what could this mean? Well, if you didn't know, one of Finn's past lives was a butterfly. So I'm thinking Finn, but why the bear mask? Well, if you remember, after he defeated the bear, he fell back on that bright apple tree and got a pretty nasty looking cut that doesn't look too good. I'm thinking that because Finn got cut by this weird mystical thing, he's gonna turn into one of the bear creatures, or at least some sort of creature that is supposed to be in the heart of the forest. Because even the creatures we see in the very beginning, they all have faces, but are weirdly distorted. I'm guessing whatever this bright green apple tree is in the center of the heart of the forest is actually a trap. And if you get cut by it, you turn into this weird monster. At least that's what I'm thinking. But seriously, thank you all for the support and thank you for watching. Stay adventurous. Ever wondered about the hidden secrets in episode 3 of Fionna and Cake? Well, today we're diving deep into Cake the cat and uncovering mysteries you've never imagined. Let's get started. Starting off with the intro sequence, it seems to be the same one that we saw in Simon Petrikov. After the intro sequence, we open up to a mysterious floating island. And no, this isn't the human island, and it looks like we've never seen it before, but what if I told you we have? Or at least it was planned to. This floating temple island looks very familiar to the one we would have seen in the episode, The Helmet of Thorgon. This was an episode outlined for season 1 of Adventure Time that never made it to the storyboard phase of production. But I mean, just look at this. They look almost identical. But I mean, just from the outside shot alone of this floating temple, there seems to be a weird fixation on eyes, specifically gold eyes. We saw it in episode 1 Fionna Campbell, and we even saw it in episode 2 Simon Petrikov, and we'll even get a better look at it later on in this episode. But as we cut to what's inside of this floating temple, it's Finn and Jake, the same Finn and Jake that we saw in the trailer. And who are they fighting? King Cockatrice. Now I gotta give myself some pats on the back for this, because in my trailer breakdown video, I pointed out that the background of where we saw Finn and Jake looked very similar to the shot of King Cockatrice screeching. But even the background of this temple looks very familiar, because if we zoom in on that creature on the bottom right, it looks pretty similar to the same creature that Simon had on his wall. But this entire first shot of Finn and Jake is so amazing because they even transform into the Jake suit, which is just a testament to their friendship, and that's how they end up taking out King Cockatrice with the Jake suit. However, another thing to talk about is Finn still has the Jake tattoo, which we thought he might have got after Jake had died. So what's going on here? It seems that Finn and Jake are still thriving, living their best life, going adventures every day. Something smells fishy. And sure enough, we zoom out and see that it's actually just Prisma watching Finn and Jake. However, this also brings up an important question. Is this just a flashback, or is this an alternate universe in which Jake is still alive? Well, if you remember from the last episode, it was very clear that Prismo is pretty distraught over the death of Jake, and that gets confirmed even more in this episode. As Finn and Jake continue to fight, Prismo grows a warm smile on his face, even choosing to ignore his responsibility with that pink button to continue watching Finn and Jake adventures. Now, going back to the question on whether or not Jake is alive or this is just an alternate universe in which Jake never died, it's hard to answer the question without spoiling what happens in the next episode. But this more than likely is an alternate universe in which Finn and Jake are still living their best lives adventure. I know that kind of sucks without giving an explanation to my answer, but make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on episode 4's analysis and deep dive, because that will give a way better explanation on why I think that. But then we cut to the title card for this episode, Cake the Cat. And let me just say, I love the style that they're going for. Having each episode be a different character's name and having each title card stylized in a different way, it looks amazing. But we pick back up exactly where we left off in episode 1. But this time we get the POV of what Fionna saw. And this sets into motion pretty much the entire episode of what Fionna goes through. But then we come back to Simon's world where Cake just jumped through the back of his head, and Simon is surprised as to why the ritual to open the portal didn't work. As Cake meows frantically, Simon realizes that he still has the translator that he ripped off of the dog. He puts the translator on Cake, and the first thing Cake says is Fionna, to Simon's surprise, because he thinks that there's no way that this is Cake. Now, Simon asks Cake how she got here, and Cake said that she followed a song and starts to hum it. Now, Simon's reaction looks very angry, and I don't exactly know why. Why would Simon be so angry that Cake followed this song in order to jump through a portal in the back of his head? Then out of nowhere, Astrid shows up asking Simon for her book back, but Astrid calls Simon Ice King, and that's another thing to bring up. How does Astrid even know who the Ice King is? Because when the humans first arrived, it was after the events of Come Along With Me, and after the events of Come Along With Me, Ice King reverted back to Simon. So the only way that Astrid could know about the Ice King is from stories. But from who? And why does she think the Ice King is so cool? But Cake the Cat ends up getting out and makes her frantic journey throughout the human city trying to find Fionna. And let me just say, this city looks amazing. I'm gonna say it, but I would love to live here. But as Cake continues her journey, she runs down an alleyway. And who do we see? Minerva. I guess it makes sense, but not only is this a little random because this is the only time we see or hear from Minerva in the entire episode, but it's also pretty cool because that means Finn can go visit his mom whenever he wants to. I really hope we see Minerva more in the next episodes, and I really hope we see Minerva and Finn reunite once again. But as Cake continues down the alleyway, we see that the humans use these tubes as a form of transportation, which makes a whole lot of sense if you consider the history of the humans. After the Mushroom War, they fled to islands outside of Ooo, which eventually became known as the Hub Island. And what did they use for transportation on these islands? The exact same tubes. So it's cool to see all this technology that they're bringing to the land of Ooo. But then Cake takes a leap dive off the human island and plummets to the ground. But as she looks around, she spots the Ice Kingdom with its sparkly blue glow. And this sets into motion Cake's entire entire journey throughout this episode. For whatever reason, she still wants to go to the blue glow, even though she already went through a blue glowing portal that transported her into an entire different universe. And as you know, cats have 9 lives and always land on their feet, so Cake is fine. But as she wakes up, there's a butterfly with a smiley face on her head, which, if you didn't know, was the exact same butterfly that she dreamed of in the previous episode. And to give you a little context, if you didn't know, in the credits of every single episode, Fionna and Cake dream of something different. And in episode 2, they dreamed of the bone mask that the bear wore with a butterfly with a smiley face on top of it. And this is the exact same one. But as Cake becomes enthralled by the land of Ooh that she now resides in, she runs into the squirrel. And if you didn't know, this squirrel is from the episode Up a Tree. And we'll see more of the animals from the Up a Tree episode in literally a few seconds. But as soon as Cake is literally about to obliterate the squirrel, the ice thing flies overhead, heading to the Ice Kingdom. For some reason, I think this will be important. As we see, the ice thing only has 2 of the 3 gems from the Ice Crown, which, if you didn't know, is because of Come Along With Me, when it fell off of him onto a donut, and then he proposed to Turtle Princess. Now, in the Fionna Campbell episode 1 of Fionna and Cake, we see that the newspaper Queenie is holding has a picture of Betty and the shape-shifting Cake the cat, but it also has the Ice Crown with 1 of its gems. For some reason, I think this 1 gem that is missing from the ice thing and that is present in the newspaper is going to be important somehow. It could be to open up the Enchiridion to travel through all the different universes, as we saw in the crossover episode, but I think it's going to be important. But Cake ends up eating one of the apples that the squirrel is selling, and it turns out it's a cursed apple that makes her super small, so they head off to the marketplace to find a strawberry that will make her big again. Now, this marketplace that they're traveling to is filled with Easter eggs and callbacks to Adventure Time. But before we get to that, we cut back to Fionna's universe, as she's frantically still looking for Cake. And if you couldn't tell by now, this news show is obviously rated TV-14, and I'm loving it. I'm also loving Marsha Lee and LSP. Something about their dynamic when they're talking to Fionna is absolutely amazing. But then again, Fionna is set in finding this blue portal that Cake jumped into, which makes total sense. I would do absolutely anything to find my pet that ran away. But as soon as Fionna says that, we cut back to Cake, who is absolutely enjoying her life in the land of Ooh, saying that she likes making decisions on her own. So as Cake and the squirrel continue their adventure to the marketplace, they get ambushed by the squirrel's ex-roommates from the tree. As you can see, they've definitely been through some stuff, but does the chipmunk remind you of somebody? At first, I thought Freddy Fazbear, but then I remembered the Capola gang from Regular Show, and look at Dominic, almost identical. So a pretty cool reference to Regular Show. But they finally make it to the marketplace, and there are a ton of callbacks and Easter eggs to older episodes of Adventure Time. So let's talk about them. Right off the bat, we see this tree person from the episode It Came from the Nightosphere. Then we see this bush and leaf person from the episode James Baxter the Horse. Then this ant family who we've seen throughout Adventure Time before. And these last 2 characters, first, the balloon animal who may have been one of the balloons from the episode What is Life? And finally this grass guy who looks very familiar, but I can't remember where he's from. Then we get a better look at the red ants and the leaf person, but another vendor pops up in the right, and that is another character from the episode James Baxter the Horse. Then we see Rainy, which was a character from the episode Another Way, and she'll pop up again later in this episode. Then the squirrel's boss looks like someone from the Wildberry Kingdom, and we'll see a lot of Wildberry citizens across the whole marketplace. Speaking of, this strawberry we see in the top left is an upper middle class Wildberry kid that we saw in the episode Furniture and Meat. Then, probably the craziest of them all, we see Pillow People from the episode Pahoy. And if you remember that episode, that universe got KO'd by Golb. So how are Pillow People walking around the land of Ooh? Then we see another vendor who is another tree people from the episode It Came from the Nightosphere. Then we see another citizen from the Wildberry Kingdom, specifically the Blueberry Customer customer that we saw in Furniture and Meat. Then we see another person from the episode James Backs to the Horse, the speaker, and one of the rocks in the audience. Then we see a cutie from the episode Conquest of Cuteness, specifically this cutie right here. And then some weird green toast guy, no idea who that could be. Then we see somebody from the Slime Kingdom, along with another tree person. Then we see another vendor as a rock person. More specifically, it looks like the rock person that stole rocks in the episode Rattleballs. Then moving down, we see yet another tree person, but we see one of the spiky people from the episode Gut Grinder. Then we see Rainy again, who starts playing a song on her guitar when Cake joins in and starts to sing. Now we see even more characters from the Adventure Time universe, so let's talk about them. First, this green guy is an old soft person who again we see in the episode Gut Grinder. Then we see even more vendors, the first one being another soft person from the episode Gut Grinder. Then we see Mrs. Goji Berry from the episode Furniture and Meat, and you might be wondering, do we see Mr. Goji Berry? And we actually do later on. Then the last vendor is a peanut person that we see in the episode Henchman. Then we see another strawberry person walk behind Cake, but this one isn't the upper middle class Wildberry kid. This is Chocoberry, because we can see the chocolate dripping down. Even the stump that Rainy is sitting on is either another tree person or the stump that we see in the episode Another Way. Even Shelby makes an appearance. As Cake runs up this tree, the last person she shoves off is Shelby. Then we get the debut episode of two new characters, Coffee Guy and the Burger, who will actually have voice lines later on in this episode. Then we see even more characters, the first being the Coal Man, the elderly man made of coal who appears in Memories of Boom Boom Mountain episode, followed by a mushroom with a mustache who I don't quite know who he is. Then we see another Wildberry citizen, this time Wildberry Chef, followed by Mr. Goji Berry, followed by the little cactus creature who also appears in the episode Memories of Boom Boom Mountain, then another peanut person from the episode Henchman, and another soft guy from the episode Gut Grinder. Then maybe another pillow person ominously smiling at us from the background. The inclusion of the pillow people is such an interesting take, because like I said before, we had left that episode off assuming that Golb had destroyed it. And with the mystery of Golb Betty in this entire series, I'm very interested to see if the pillow people or the pillow world will have anything important later on. We finally cut back to Simon's place with Astrid patiently waiting outside, and it turns out Chuscoos didn't die. Seeing the way Simon treats Chuscoos in this is kind of scary. He duct tapes his mouth shut, and we cut back to Cake in the marketplace. And there's even more characters to talk about. The first of those being the Hot Dog Knights, which we saw in the episode The Limit. Amazing episode, by the way, and so funny. But we actually saw the Hot Dog Knights in the official trailer, in one frame, right here. Then we see Jamaica from the Pup Gang from the episode You Made Me. Then we see one of the Cloud people from the episode Astral Plane. Then something odd happens when Cake starts playing with one of the Hot Dog Knights. And as she's kicking it up in the air, it teleports out of existence, very similar to how Prismo does it. Now, this could be our first look at some foreshadowing, the effects that Prismo has on the land of Ooh, and in fact every universe. Because if you remember, most of the Hot Dog Knights didn't make it out alive, so how are they here alive? Well, it could be that Prismo is pulling some strings that maybe he shouldn't be, and that's actually a huge theme for the very end of this episode and the entirety of the next episode. Then we see another vendor as a goblin from the episode The Silent King. Then we see a bushel of corn guy running away from Cake, which is some pretty huge foreshadowing for the next episode. Then we see this goblin offering up some fish, and he looks familiar, but I don't remember where he's from. Then we see the rock wizard from the episode Wizard Battle. Then we see what looks like the rock nurse carrying a cart of gems and stones from the episode The Chamber of Frozen Blades, and yet another pillow person. And oh yeah, did I mention throughout this entire time where I was pointing out past characters from Adventure Time that Cake was singing her song but destroying everything else in the process? Well, as she finishes her song, it finally catches up with her, and everybody from the marketplace is mad at her, even starting to surround and close in on her. And just as it seemed that everything was done for, the squirrel shows up, throwing her one of the strawberries to make her big again, but as he throws it, he misses and dips. And as we're on the edge of our seats to see if Cake makes it out alive, we cut back to Fiona's world, and she's still looking for that blue portal to find Cake. She's been out all night hanging up these posters, but as the sun comes up, she ends off right outside Butler's Buttery Buns. And just as she's about to fall asleep upright on the side of a bowl, Gary shows up getting ready for work. But Gary is over the moon to help Fionna find Cake. He even makes her a frozen triple shot latte. But as she looks down at her latte, she sees the ice and a blue glow starts to emit. Then she looks over at the fridge and it's glowing bright blue, which is also what happened in the first episode, when Cake saw that the exact same fridge was glowing bright blue. So she jumps through it, because after all, this is the same blue portal that took Cake. But how did this blue glow even start? Well, it turns out Simon tried the ritual to summon Golb once again, reviving Chuskus as one last shock. And with his mouth duct taped shut, it seems almost inevitable that it will work this time. But it doesn't. It still opens a portal to Fionna and Cake's world, meaning one of two things: that this ritual will never summon Golb, will never summon Golbetti, or two, he was still thinking about Fionna and Cake. Whatever it may be, Fionna and Cake are now both in the land of Ooh. And Simon is in disbelief, in fact angry, and it makes a whole lot more sense in episode 4. Even the way he treats Chuskus again is very scary and somewhat creepy. Even Fiona's fed up with it. She just wants to get out of this old creepy apartment. So she does, and meets Astrid waiting outside. At first, Astrid just thinks that this Fionna is cosplaying, looking for her cat that she saw run out of Simon's apartment yesterday. So with all her fancy new tech in the land of Ooh, Astrid helps Fionna find Cake. But as we're zooming through this new human city, I want to point out a strange theme. There seems to be eyes all over this place in the land of Ooh. I mean, you can spot it almost everywhere, which makes me think that eyes are somehow going to be important, whether that be physically or metaphorically. We're yet to see. They end up finding Cake right where we left off with her, and her fate is revealed. Luckily, they didn't kill her, but they locked her in a pillory and threw tomatoes at her. I actually had to look up what this was, but yeah, it's called a pillory. Luckily, Fionna gets Cake out of it, and they finally reunite, this time in the land of Ooh. But they aren't out of the rough yet, as we hear the coffee guy's voice. And does his voice sound familiar?
Boo! No happy reunions for the criminal!
That's right, it's Jeremy Shada, the same guy who voices Finn. And it's honestly pretty refreshing to hear Finn, Jeremy Shada, voice another character in Adventure Time. I kinda like it. But then the green guy tells Timmy to go grab the bazooka. That's right, this marketplace has a bazooka, and they're about to use it on Fionna and Cake. But then we get this kick butt montage of Fionna absolutely slaying, and they both end the fight feeling somewhat familiar. That this feeling of fighting, in a way, makes sense. And as soon as they say that, Astrid realizes that these are the real Fionna and Cake, and just as they're about to go on another adventure, they get teleported by Prismo, which is something we saw in the middle of this episode. But if you know these episodes of Fionna and Cake, you would know that this episode isn't over yet, and there's going to be an Easter egg in the credits, that being Fionna and Cake's dream. If you're new here, in the credits of every episode of Fionna and Cake both dream of something, and that something being different in every single episode. The dream in this episode seems a bit odd to me. It's a truck carrying apples with a wheel fallen off. Now, I know what the apples mean. Those are the apples that the squirrel was carrying on his way back to the marketplace. But I don't quite know what the truck with the fallen wheel could mean. So please let me know. And please let me know if I missed something in this episode. But thank you all so much for watching, and as always, stay adventurous. Episode 4 of Fionna and Cake, Prismo the Wishmaster, might have just dropped the biggest piece of lore in the show's entire history. So let's talk about it. The episode begins, and we're immediately shot into a familiar scene. This is the Drift, a space you might remember from the episode BMO from Distant Lands. Now, if you thought the Drift was a lost cause, think again. It's now about 23 years into the future since the events of BMO took took place. And it looks like this place has not only survived, but has also undergone some noticeable changes since we last saw it. First off, let's talk about those Hugo mats. You remember them, right? The vending machines that were secretly hastening the decline of the drift? Well, it looks like nature has reclaimed them. They're abandoned and ensnared by overgrown vegetation, giving us this hauntingly beautiful picture of what happens when human, or should I say post-human, interference ends. So the drift isn't dead. It's a living, evolving environment. But as we continue, we slowly go into Sammy's tea house. But real quick, we can't overlook this spot in the plaza, exactly where Sammy's tea house is. What makes it especially interesting is in fact its location. It's smack dab on the spot where we saw a mysterious Hugo building in BMO. I mean, could there be a better nod to continuity? Well, actually there will be later in this episode. But as we go into Sammy's tea house, we spot 3 characters. A mysterious character enjoying tea on the right, Normulon, another customer who just left thanking Sammy, the shop owner, for the tea. Now these names, Sammy and Normulon, might sound a little familiar. These characters are undeniably wink and nods to Cheers and its unforgettable duo of Sam and Norm. And if you remember, this isn't the first time the series has tipped its hat to Cheers. Previous episodes like Simon and Marcy, and episodes inside of Fionna Cake like Fionna Campbell and Simon Petrikoff all have shown off the sitcom Cheers. This, however, is probably just a little Easter egg. Now back to that mysterious customer that I pointed out earlier. The owner, Sammy, tells this mysterious customer that they're about to close, and he promises he won't be long and finishes his tea. But as he compliments the chef, the mood turns ominous, and instead of thanking Sammy for the delicious tea, he reveals his real name, Cairo Siphon.
Cairo Siphon.
Right after he says this, the owner turns into a flame being, and the mysterious customer turns into the scarab. It turns out Cairo Siphon abandoned his post at some point in his life, causing the scarab to hunt him down. This first interaction that we see of the scarab kind of sets into motion what his job is. He's a god auditor who works on checking on cosmic entities to make sure they're all in line. That cosmic entities part is really important, and I'll mention it again in a little bit. But the scarab quickly takes out Cairo Siphon, causing him to transform into this little pixelated egg-looking thing, which immediately reminded me of a Tamagotchi. And it turns out the scarab has a ton of them, all of these things being cosmic entities that he tracks down and neutralizes. But let's talk about these because some of them are a little familiar. The first one being someone that kind of looks like Giuseppe, who was a character who appeared in the episode Thanks for the Crab Apples Giuseppe, but the second one kind of looks like a catalyst comet. Now, this revelation could shed light on a multitude of theories. Firstly, we've established in the past that the catalyst comet isn't your run-of-the-mill celestial object. No, it's imbued with cosmic significance. Remembering this is crucial because this scarab, as we know, is like the cosmic cop of the universe, ensuring these big players don't step out of bounds. Alright, now bear with me. If we follow this train of thought, there's a possibility that this particular catalyst comet went rogue. Now, if that happened, it'd only be logical for someone like the scarab to step in. This isn't just some random theory though. I've got a reason to believe this, and it ties into someone you might not expect. Enter Martin Mertens, Finn's dad. When the scarab is browsing through his most wanted list, right there is Martin's name, flipping us the bird and labeled as desertion. It's interesting because this isn't the first time Martin's been associated with cosmic entities, or in fact cosmic crimes, as he literally was imprisoned in the Citadel. We all remember that poignant moment when Finn rescued a catalyst comet from the clutches of Orglord in the episode The Comet. In a twist, the comet then extends an offer to Finn, an eternity of cosmic travel. But while Finn turns it down, Martin, with his notorious track record of escapades, accepts. Now it starts to make sense, doesn't it? The catalyst comet, with its role as a harbinger of change every 1,000 years, deviated from its course to hit Earth. Instead of hitting Earth, it got into intercepted. Martin joins the comet, essentially altering its original purpose, something that would surely catch the scarab's attention. And then, when the scarab finally intercepts the comet, Martin, true to his nature, slips away, thus earning that desertion tag. We also see the Voidcaster as one of these people on the wanted list, and we saw the Voidcaster in the episode Escape from the Citadel, the same episode where Martin escapes from the Citadel. However, as the scarab continues to scroll through his crystal collector wanted list, he stops at Prismo, who is listed as Violation, and he's oddly pleased at the sight of Prismo's name, which sets into motion the entire theme of this episode and pretty much all of the scarab's motives. Then we see the amazing title card for this episode, but then it's revealed why Prismo has this violation and is on the wanted list. It's a crossover, which basically means that something or someone from a universe traveled to a totally different universe and isn't supposed to be there. But this is something that we kind of pieced together from the first few episodes already. The most obvious one being seeing Cake jump through Simon's head and then cutting to the time room with a pink button appearing on the remote and starting to flash and beep. Speaking of that beeping, Prismo continues to ignore it, looking very depressed in a hot tub because he misses Jake so much. In fact, when they first met, he shared this very hot tub with Jake. We also see Wyatt, who was one of Tree Trunk's annoying ex-husbands. We also learn why he ended up in the first Dead Worlds in the Together Again episode. He tells Prismo he's done some terrible things to get here, which is pretty evident from the blood stains on his shirt. But back to that beeping again, and it's preventing Wyatt from concentrating on his wish, eventually wishing that it would be quiet enough for him to think. But unfortunately, Prismo immediately grants this wish, transporting Wyatt to a silent film-like world where Tree Trunks is a bank robber being chased by Princess Bubblegum, and Wyatt is tied to the train tracks about to be run over. This black and white cartoon universe Wyatt got sent to is very reminiscent of 1920s vintage silent cartoons, with specific inspiration from Little Red Riding Hood, created by Walter Lantz in 1925, and Charlie on the Farm. We know this thanks to Nick Cross, who animated this chunk of the episode, and Steve Wolfhard and Graham Falk, who storyboarded this chunk of the episode, but specifically Steve Wolfhard, who posted the exact inspirations that they used for this chunk of the episode. This is actually a perfect time to take a moment to just appreciate the mountain of creativity and hard work that the entire Adventure Time crew has given us over the years. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you to anyone who has helped create Adventure Time in any way for dedicating your skills and passion into something that's been a part of my life for literally so long. I'm beyond grateful, and I know I speak for so many more people who feel the same way. Sorry for the little heartfelt tangent. Let's get back to the episode. We left off with Wyatt being tied to the train tracks about to be ran over, but he's saved at the last minute by Peppermint Butler. The train still pokes him enough that he passes gas, causing everyone to laugh at him as he silently curses out Prismo. However, in this silent film universe, we see the silhouette of the Lich hidden in the cave behind the version of the Princess Bubblegum. The snail can also be seen just above. Not only is this whole silent film universe creepy to begin with, but this shot of the Lich smiling in the shadows of the cave is so scary. This pretty much confirms that we will see more of the Lich throughout this series, because if you remember from the episode crossover, the Lich's hand got transported into every single universe in the multiverse. So I'm guessing this won't be the last time we see the Lich. Prismo finally checks what the beeping is, and he finally learns that it's a crossover in the main timeline of Ooh. As he's flipping through the channels, we see and get caught up with a lot of the characters from Adventure Time. Like we see Huntress Wizard just cruising throughout the forest, then he flips to a flashback scene of when the Candy Orphanage just opened, then to Peps and Blaine, who are still enrolled in the wizard school, and they seem to have become good friends, sharing a milkshake together. Then we see Susan and Frida still going on adventures throughout the land of Ooh. We even see in Come Along With Me them still going on adventures. And from this episode, Prismo the Wishmaster, they are still going strong 12 years later. The final channel that Prismo flips to is Fionna and Cake, picking up exactly where we left off himself in the Cake the Cat episode. He immediately teleports the two into the time room, but is left confused by their strange appearance, which he promptly rectifies by removing Cake's translator and changing both her and Fionna into their appearances from the Ice King's fanfiction. Prismo is very curious on how Fionna and Cake got into Ooh and goes to check Simon's mind, which is our first big clue on what's to come, but it turns out he can't access it. So he teleports Simon, who was in the middle of a shower, into the time room. After giving him some clothes, Prismo interrogates Simon over how Fionna and Cake got into Ooh, eventually determining Simon was trying to summon Gold Betty. Simon complains that he should be allowed to try after Prismo himself previously failed, which was a callback to the finale Come Along With Me, where we see for a brief second Simon trying to wish Betty back into existence, but it failing, which was very similar to when Kingman tried to wish Margles back in the episode You Forgot Your Floaties. However, this is where the juicy bits of lore start to come out. Fionna and Cake demand to know who Prismo is, and he explains that he is the Wishmaster, tasked with granting wishes. But he explains that sometimes his wishes create other realities, starting off by showing them Farm World, which is an alternate timeline created when Finn wished that the Lich never even existed in the episode Finn the Human. He then shows them a funny shaped universe. Not only is this universe unlike anything we've really seen, it was also wished for, similar to Farm World. The only thing it kind of resembles is the colors of the bird Dead World that we saw in Together Again, and the shapes of the audio afterlife that we also see in Together Again. But we know for a fact that these aren't universes, they are dead worlds. So I have no idea what this funny shaped universe could mean, or even who wished for it. He then continues by showing them the marvelous misadventures of Flapjack as a universe, which is a pretty big bombshell because for a while, people have speculated that the marvelous misadventures of Flapjack and Adventure Time share the same canonical multiverse, and they confirmed it in this episode. Even the very scene of the marvelous misadventures of Flapjack featured in this episode was storyboarded by Pendleton Ward, the creator of Adventure Time. Then the Grotto universe, which we saw in the episode Beyond the Grotto, and finally Ooh, which he calls his favorite because it had his favorite guy, Jake the dog. Now, some of you might be wondering, is this Ooh universe that he's showing Fionna and Cake an alternate reality or a flashback? That's a great question, and I'm pretty sure I have the answer to it, and it all lies in something Prismo says. But first, if you remember from episode 3 of Fionna and Cake, Cake the Cat, we see Prismo clearly missing Jake the dog, the very thing that he grew to despise, and it's not even his fault. Then, out of nowhere, we hear a knock at the door to the time room, and who is it? The Scarab. Now Prismo's freaking out because he knew he messed up, and that also just kind of goes to show how powerful the Scarab really is. And just to give you a quick reminder, the Scarab is here because Prismo violated the rules of being a Wishmaster. He didn't respond to the crossover alerts right away, which alerted Scarab of a violation. Because remember, at this point in time, the Scarab doesn't know about Prismo's unauthorized universe, only the fact that he did not respond to those alerts about the two crossovers in the Land of Ooh universe. So, in a way to try and hide the evidence from the Scarab, he splits off into two beings. One escorts Fionna, Cake, and Simon to the exit downstairs, while the other distracts the Scarab. The Scarab, however, becomes quickly suspicious because Prismo isn't doing such a good job at lying. But as Fionna, Cake, and Simon continue downstairs, Prismo explains that the Scarab is a god auditor, and if he finds out that Prismo did indeed create an unauthorized universe, he would be in some pretty big trouble from his boss. This is the first time we hear about Prismo's boss again since the episode crossover, and it also reveals that Prismo and the Scarab work for the same boss. But Prismo notices a huge flaw in his Fionna and Cake stories, and it's the fact that Fionna is wearing a skirt, making it super hard for her to walk around. So Prismo gives her some shorts. But this also reveals the very thing that will take down Prismo. It's becoming increasingly hard for him to keep two conversations going at the same time. And and instead of asking Fionna how her new shorts are, he asks the Scarab. He actually does a pretty good job at playing it off, but the Scarab still grows increasingly suspicious, so much so that he makes Prismo open up the door to the basement, and so Fionna Cake and Simon have to continue and end up in the Time Core. Prismo explains that these two beings smash each other constantly, sending time waves throughout the multiverse to be experienced as the passage of time, which is actually pretty cool because we saw this very concept fleshed out all the way back in season 4, specifically in the episode The Lich, where Buko explains exactly what we just saw in the Time Core. I just think it's so cool seeing details from all the way back to season 4 are still being fleshed out today. Prismo continues and explains the concept of the multiverse with the web of different universes, very similar to the one that we saw in the episode crossover. However, because Fionna and Cake's universe is unauthorized, it is way off the map, and its mere existence could have dangerous effects on the other realities, which actually gets me thinking. I know I've mentioned it before, but in the crossover episode, the Lich's hand gets transported to every single universe in the multiverse, and although Fionna and Cake's universe is portrayed as a bad thing because its mere existence could have dangerous effects on other realities, what if it turns out to be a good thing? What if Fionna and Cake's universe is so far away from every single other universe that it's not even connected at all, that the Lich's hand isn't in Fionna and Cake's universe? And if we do end up seeing more of the Lich in the future episodes, maybe their universe is the one saving grace where they can truly defeat the Lich. But that's a little out there. Prismo, Fionna, Cake, and Simon finally arrive at their destination, the room holding Old Man Prismo. As it turns out, Prismo wants to force Simon to reopen the portal so they can put Fionna and Cake back in their universe. One thing to note is that this room, bed, and Old Man Prismo are all from the episode Is That You? And if you didn't know, this Old Man Prismo lying in bed is actually Jake. Another quick thing to note is that this room has gotten a complete remodel to look like gold. Whether or not this was on purpose is kind of a mystery, but most likely it was, so that Prismo can create the perfect conditions for Simon to perform the same spell that brought Fionna and Cake to Ooh, so they can send him back. But Fionna and Cake aren't having it. They don't want to go back to their universe. They want to live in the magical land of Ooh, so they make a run for it. And this is where Prismo messes everything up. He again gets confused on who he's talking to, and the Prismo that's with the Scarab basically confesses that he made an unauthorized universe. Now the Scarab knows for sure, and he's on the hunt. But did you notice the room that they're in? It's Prismo's Artisan Pickles, which made their first appearance in the Jake the Dog episode. Now, this room kind of makes me a little sad because we know that Jake absolutely loved Prismo's pickles, and the fact that Prismo made an entire room for it really shows you how much Prismo loves and misses Jake. However, the true motives of the Scarab and why he was so excited to see Prismo's name in the wanted list is revealed. He sees a golden opportunity in knowing of Prismo's misconduct, pledging to turn in the Rogue universe and become Wishmaster himself. It turns out the Scarab felt some animosity towards Prismo because he feels like he should have been the Wishmaster and not Prismo. So remember how Fionna and Cake ran from Prismo because they didn't want to go back to their universe? Well, it turns out they did all that running for nothing. They just did one big loop and ended up back in the same room as before. However, this time, the Scarab breaks in, promising to turn in Prismo, destroy the Rogue universe, and Fionna and Cake with it. But after all, Prismo created Fionna and Cake, so he decides to help them. He gives them the time remote and telling them and Simon to run as he holds off the Scarab. Despite Simon initially not wanting to help, a good slap to the face helps him come to his senses. Not only that, but I think Simon saw the scared look of Fionna and Cake about returning to a world that they didn't feel they belonged in, which really resonated with Simon, surrounded by a magical world. In fact, this is what I think the entire series will be about. Fionna and Cake slowly growing on Simon, that it comes to a point where Simon has to choose, either to save the entire world or see Betty again, or to save Fionna and Cake. But Simon ultimately agrees to come with Fionna and Cake and help, and with the press of a button, they escape. Now, I may be looking a little too far into this, but look at the button that they press. It's the pink button, the button that alerts Prismo of a crossover. They arrive in a cornfield in a different universe, but does this universe also contain a crossover? Or like I said, am I just looking too far into it? But as soon as they get to this universe, they end up arguing a little bit on how to get back to Ooh. But as all hope seems lost, Simon looks down at the blue robe that he's wearing that the Ice King used to wear and comes up with his master plan. Simon tells Fionna and Cake he knows how to protect them from the scarab, bring magic back to their world, and make it last forever. It almost seems too good to be true, and sure enough, it is. He is going to become the Ice King again. And if you know Fionna and Cake episodes, you would know that this isn't over yet. There's an Easter egg in every single credits scene of every single episode, and this one's no different. But first, I'm so excited to see whether or not Simon will put back on the ice crown. I really hope he doesn't, but at the same time, I'm kind of excited to see if he will. But let's get back to the Easter egg in the credits scene. Shows us Fionna and Cake dreaming of blocks. I thought last episode's was most confusing, but this one might take the cake. Not only that, but we see a letter block that we used to play with as kids with the letter P, probably standing for Prismo, which, speaking of Prismo, he definitely got KO'd by the scarab. I hope I'm wrong, but come on, what else could have happened? Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Back to the credits scene. The actual blocks that we see in the dream sequence might resemble those shapes that float around Golb's head. I could be reaching there, but I don't know what else they stand for. This dream sequence really got me stumped, so please let me know what you think. But thank you all for watching, and as always, stay adventurous. From this episode, we learned that Iceman went on a bit of a rampage from the time period between the episode Jake the Dog and the episode Crossover, which is when Finn finally got cured from the ice crown. He even made a bit of a name for himself, with the mother and father calling him the Snowman. But why would the mother and father be scared of the Snowman? Well, it turns out their baby starts crying, which causes Icefin to find them, and without hesitation, he freezes them, all of them. Even though this is a pretty small detail, but you might be asking yourself, why is the Icefin freezing these people? Well, that's actually connected to the episode Crossover, where we see Icefin has gathered a huge amount of frozen people, with its center being the farm world Enchiridion, which the Lich plan to use to open the portal to the multiverse. Fionna, Cake, and Simon are also in farm world, with the biggest giveaway being that plane, which we previously saw was frozen, meaning a lot of time has passed, and it gets confirmed even later in the episode that that first scene of farm world was indeed a flashback of the Icefin. But something interesting to note about this scarecrow is the ice crown that it's wearing. It's obviously fake, but it resembles Icefin, with his blonde hair poking out from under it and his iconic hat. But two things to note that is very interesting. This ice crown, which obviously resembles Icefin, only has one gem, which, if you remember, even from the flashback that we got at the very beginning of this episode, the ice crown that Icefin wears has all three gems. And what's even more interesting is that we've seen this ice crown with one gem before, hidden in the newspaper that Queenie wears in the very first episode of Fionna and Cake. What's even more crazy is that we know that this one gem of the ice crown was the last and most important gem that was needed to activate the farm world Enchiridion to open the portal to the multiverse. What's even more crazy is that Ooze Enchiridion was the gem that Princess Bubblegum had, not the ice crown gem. But if you remember, Ooze Enchiridion got destroyed, not just old age. Of course, with the mix of his shape-shifting DNA, things could be different. The lifespan of a shape-shifting creature could be pretty short, but for some reason in the land of Ooh, he didn't. We also see some of the artifacts that Farmworld Finn has hung up, which includes the gun that Marceline had protecting Simon in the ice crown, his flute, what looks to be like a pair of tweezers, a cell phone, a grip strengthener, a saw blade, and a harpoon, but also the exact arm that Farmworld Finn had before he put on the ice crown. In fact, that's the sword attachment that Choose Bruise gave him to chase down the Destiny Gang in the first place. What's also a cool little Easter egg is that you can see some drawings on the wall that were most likely from the kids, and one of them appears to be the Candy Kingdom, with the very tree that sprouts out from the Candy Kingdom being present. Now, I don't know if this means anything or if it's just a cool little Easter egg. I'm guessing it's probably just a cool little Easter egg. However, as they continue to eat at the table, Simon mentions to Finn that Jay told told them that he might know something about the ice crown, but it's not. It's a butter knife. Fionna even looks confused on what she just pulled out. So what happened? Well, this can be explained in something we saw in episode 3, Cake the cat. As Cake was playing around with one of the hot dog knights, it transformed into a normal hot dog. For whatever reason, Fionna and Cake both possess the power or ability or curse that they have a chance at anything they touch will remove all of the magic from the object or thing that they touch. We saw that with Cake the cat in episode 3 with the hot dog knight, and we get our first tiny glimpse of it happening with Fionna. And in the next episode, we'll get a way more clear-cut look at this, but for now, this is just a little foreshadowing about what's to come. Back in the crater though, Fionna Cake and Simon get quickly caught and detained by the Destiny Gang. While Simon is trapped, he notices the jewel that Jay gave to Little Destiny and instantly recognizes it as a gem from the crown and tells her that that's what's been making her sick since it's infused with ice magic. Jay instantly realizes his mistake, that the very thing he gave Little Destiny was the very thing that was making her sick. But Big Destiny, being the unlikable guy he is, quickly uses this to turn Little Destiny against Jay, telling Little Destiny that Jay did this on purpose. Starting to believe her father, Bigger, and the entire Big Destiny gang flee out of being scared, but Farmworld Finn stays and actually seems to be putting up a fight. But that wouldn't last long, as the Scarab morphs into this four-legged spider-like creature with these needles for arms and legs and stabs Farmworld Finn in the head. Simon puts the jewel in the remote and gets the 3 of them out of Farmworld. Not without the Scarab tagging along though, because he ended up grabbing Simon's leg right before they teleported out of there. Now if you know Fionna and Cake episodes, you would know that this episode isn't done yet. There is an Easter egg in each credit scene of each episode, and this one's super good and I can actually explain. But before we get to that, I have to explain the elephant in the room. Did Farmworld Finn die? We literally see him get stabbed in the head, but I really hope we see Farmworld Finn in future episodes. But let's talk about this dream sequence in the credits scene. If you're new to Fionna and Cake, in the credit sequence of each episode of Fionna and Cake, Fionna and Cake dream of something, and that something being different in every single episode. And this episode is probably the most straightforward one, which shows a bunny in a field with clouds in the background, and one of its arms is a sword. Not only does this directly reference that Finn loses his arm in every single life, but it also shows us that Fionna might end up having the same fate. Because I'm pretty sure this bunny is supposed to represent Fionna, knowing that Fionna has longer ears on her hat compared to Finn, and this bunny has those longer ears. Not only that, but it might even be a reference to the episode Mortal Folly from season 2, when Princess Bubblegum, Finn, and Jake are meditating, and one of the things Finn thinks about is his future self on a grassy hill with clouds in the background and his arm replaced with a mechanical arm. But thank you all for watching, and as always, stay adventurous.